Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent computer role-playing game. This week I'm taking a look at a sort of roguelite side-scrolling adventure role-playing game. Developed by Devespresso Games and published by Head Up and Whisper Games, Vambrace Cold Soul was released back in May of 2019. Vambrace Cold Soul is a roguelite set in a fantasy realm, which has been compared in some of its gameplay aspects to Darkest Dungeon. It involves party management, crafting, and expeditions into somewhat randomized areas to accomplish quests for various factions. In terms of plot, you play the part of Avilia Lyric, whose father left her a cryptic journal and an enchanted Vambrace after he died. It is the sole item capable of passing the frozen borders of ice and air. Traveling to the Cursed City, you enter the isolated frozen city only to find it torn by internal strife and dominated by the forces of the King of Shades. Rescued by some survivors, you are conscripted to head out and face these forces, while also currying favor with the various factions within. Once you create a game, you get the introductory cutscenes that give you the backstory, and then are dropped into a sort of tutorial level focusing on some NPCs in Icenair who come across your main character after you have been familiarized with the game. After this, you are dropped into the underground base of the survivors, where you can speak with the NPCs, learn lore, explore, manage quests and your party, and prepare for adventures. Initially, you only have access to a few areas, but you quickly get access to the rest over time. There's two elements to the exploration mode shared by both the underground base and the expedition levels. First is a sort of overhead map of the area where you can follow paths to different areas. In the expedition levels, this joins various buildings and levels within the district. Within the underground base, this lets you journey to different faction headquarters and amongst the various service buildings. Once you enter a building, you are presented with a side view with your main character and her party. Along the bottom of the screen, you've got your interface icons, your party list, and your Geist meter. Each party member shows their portrait as well as their current status. The red bar on the left represents their hit points, which are reduced when they take damage. The yellow bar on the right represents their vigor, which is reduced by some traps, by general hardship, and by exposure to the elements. There's also a collection of 5 symbols under each portrait. These represent flourish points. These are gained in combat and are used to execute certain skills. When a character's vigor or their hit points are reduced to 0, they die. If that character is your main character, you are returned back to base, although you do manage to keep any of your other members of the party that are still alive at that point. The icons to the left allow you to access different menus. There's the bio page that represents the character sheet for each character, inventory that shows what you have collected, as well as your current cash in the form of Hellions and your current weight carried. If you carry too much, your entire party gets a debuff showing they are overburdened. There's the map screen that shows the local map within each building, provided that you have it, and the codex that allows you to review the notes that you've collected and information gathered, as well as the quests that you either have on or are completed. The Geist meter shows how much horror has built up during exploration. Horror builds up as you enter buildings on an expedition, as well as when you rest outside of the main base. This represents how close truly powerful creatures are coming to you in terms of hunting you down. Finally, there's a trait screen. When you accomplish certain quests in the game, you begin to acquire trait points. These are used to boost your main character Avilia Lyric and her alone. It's the only form of character advancement besides equipment that the game really has. In terms of actual attributes, each character has hit points and vigor, as I described earlier, but they have 5 attributes and a set of skills as well. Individual skills are unique to each character or character class, but the stats are common amongst all the characters. Combat affects raw damage done by any skill that deals combat damage. Sleight impacts chance at opening chests, as well as how much loot the party gets when looting something. The highest sleight skill amongst all the characters is automatically used. Awareness is used to detect and avoid traps, but also governs a character's initiative in combat, so it's important for everyone. Merchanting increases the value of deals that you get in stores, as well as the stock that they have available, and Overwatch is used to restore vigor and health during camp actions. When exploring inside of a building, whether it be in town or in expeditions, you simply move left or right, and when you get near an NPC you can talk to, an item you can peek into, an object you can inspect, and so forth, you see an icon on the screen which will indicate if it can be activated, as well as what sort of action that you take by activating it. Each individual building has multiple sections connected to one another through doorways, stairs, and side passages as well. The objective when exploring a building in an expedition is to pass through its rooms to the opposite side, unless it's a specifically themed building, which may be tied into a quest instead. This can be somewhat confusing, but most randomly generated building interiors allow you to review a map to check the room connections, just to make sure you don't get lost. When you're exploring in an expedition, however, things can get far more deadly, because you can occasionally stumble across traps, or even environmental hazards that deal minor damage. There are occasional skill-based encounters where you uncover an object or entrance to examine in more detail, at which point you can select one character to try to explore it. This can result in either a bonus for the character or a penalty, much like the miscellaneous environmental objects in Darkest Dungeon. You can also run across enemies which will trigger combat. Combat is turn-based. If you've played Darkest Dungeon, a lot may seem very familiar. Your party is on the left, foes are on the right. Each side has 4 spaces, with the spaces determining the character's range for purposes of attacks. Characters and enemies take their turns based on their initiative, which is determined by their awareness. During a character's turn, they may retreat, reorder themselves in marching order, or execute a skill. Characters generally have a basic attack, a defense option, and then 2 alternate attacks that take some flourish points to use. Attacks may deal different sorts of damage or buff individual targets, and may use a single target or multiple targets depending on the individual's skill. Each enemy has a different type, and certain enemies might resist certain forms of damage, meaning that one should pick the appropriate type of damage, be it combat, true, flat, or whatever, for a particular creature. A creature or character's skills may also allow them to resist or avoid damage. After combat, or after retrieving items from a crate, you can accumulate various items. These are either saleable to merchants found in town or out in expeditions, or they may be used to create various relics and consumables. Consumables can be used during camping to heal up, while each character can equip 1 relic. These relics boost stats and occasionally penalize 1 or 2, so each class can be better suited for a particular relic, and each class may have its own unique items in the shared as well as the shared pool, so picking relics can be important to maximizing your character's skills. After clearing a district, you may find a boss, pick up a quest item, and may earn a trait point, as I described before. And so play proceeds, with you spending time between expeditions exploring the base and speaking with NPCs, picking up quests to do, and then, doing the next expedition. This gameplay loop does seem very similar to Darkest Dungeon, although there are some strong differences, especially with how deep the systems are. In terms of presentation, the art and music of Vambrace Cold Soul are its most standout parts. Honestly, I think the art style is gorgeous and is well suited for the game's feel. The UI is alright, it's fitting for the simplicity of the game overall, and is easy enough to use with a controller, which actually allows for a fair ease of play. Where the UI really falls down, I think, is in a lack of context-sensitive text and help. With so little text available, one must rely on remembering things from the Crash Course tutorial or figuring things out during play in terms of locations. This is all well and good, except that very occasionally a few things aren't exactly clear. The music and sound effects are also mostly very nice, very atmospheric, and pleasant to listen to, although I wouldn't say any of them are really stand-out catchy. That might be a good thing in regards to this game, however. In terms of writing, Vambrace is plot-heavy. There's plenty of text, entries, and NPCs to talk to, and some have fair amounts of information, almost too much at first. This can in fact be a little bit overwhelming if you seek to explore and seek out all the information on each faction right off the bat, but fortunately the codex system allows you to review information later on. The writing is actually pretty well done, both mechanically and thematically, or at least compared to a bunch of other indie games I've played. While some creatures and setting information might seem pretty generic, there are enough differences to make the setting stand out on its own. So it's nice to look at, has gameplay elements similar to Darkest Dungeon, it has decent writing, but would I recommend Vambrace? Honestly, there's just something a little bit off about it. It's got exploration, yes, but one will quickly find that the exploration seems to be a little bit superfluous. The areas seem unnecessarily padded and drawn out. There's entire sections one can go through that are barely used for anything. There's Darkest Dungeon style combat, yes, but it's rather shallow in terms of resistances and such. They really don't make that much of a difference. And without the ability to customize skills, and more importantly, to upgrade most of your party, except for your main character, it just seems a little shallow. You're pretty much relying solely on a few relics, selecting a few different classes of NPC, and then customizing your one main character with traits to round out the party. There is crafting, which is nice, but the number of things you can craft is extremely limited, and the crafting material will just take up so much space. There's randomization, yes, but the procedurally generated levels seem to have a very limited pool to draw from. As you advance to each district, you'll quickly find it somewhat easy to navigate each building just from the general layout of buildings in that area, and you'll quickly find that you're encountering the same encounters over and over again. Vambrace just seems like it would benefit from being just slightly deeper, almost in every system it has across the board. While the art style is well polished, everything from class balance to skills to general gameplay just needs more depth. I actually think I like the look of the game better than many I keep returning to, and yet I honestly can't see myself playing this much over and over again like I do some of those other games. Even the story, while it is interesting and it is a little bit different from other generic fantasy stories, just fails to be quite interesting enough, if you can catch my meaning. And I can't recommend it for the price. It's just a little bit too disappointing across the board, in my opinion. As always, of course, your mileage may vary. However, if you can catch it at a deep discount, or as part of a bundle like I did, it may well be worth taking a look at least for the art style and music, if for nothing else. And on that note, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. This has been the RPG Crawler with my Indie Game Friday, Vambrace Cold Soul. As always, I'll leave a link to where you can pick it up below. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye.
And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.